Welcome back to Investing Talk podcast. We're looking at Surf Air Mobility today.
SRFM.
You got their ticker symbol is SRFM, and they're making some pretty big moves in the regional air travel world.
Yeah, they're definitely an interesting company, especially with all this talk about electric aviation.
It's got everyone buzzing, that's for sure.
Oh,
So let's get into it. As of December 6th, 2024, SRFM is trading at $4.66 per share,
okay.
with a market cap of $64.2 million, which puts them squarely in microcap territory.
So right away, we know we're dealing with a stock that could be pretty volatile.
Exactly. And their beta of 4.68 definitely reflect that. It's way higher than the market average.
Much higher. But here's what's interesting. Their Q3 2024 earnings actually beat expectations.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they brought in $28.4 million in revenue.
Okay, so they're generating some revenue, but what about the bottom line? Are they actually profitable?
Not yet. They have managed to shrink their losses.
Good.
But projections still show them in the red for Q4 2024.
All right, so it sounds like there's still very much a company in transition.
Yeah, for sure.
But something that really caught my attention was the idea that SRFM could be a classic Warren Buffett kind of investment. One analysis even claims they could be undervalued by as much as 47%, putting their intrinsic value closer to $8.77.
Wow, 47%. That's a huge difference. And you know what? It does line up with Buffett's love of finding those undervalued companies.
Right. It's like finding a hidden gem. But the question is, does SRFM actually fit the mold of a Buffett investment beyond just that potential for being undervalued?
That's the key question, isn't it?
So how do we figure that out? What should we be looking for?
Well, one of the things Buffett is famous for is his emphasis on companies with a strong, what he calls an economic moat.
Okay.
It basically means they have a unique competitive advantage that lets them stay profitable over the long haul.
So we need to figure out if SRFM has one of these moats.
Right. We need to assess that.
I'm assuming we're not talking about literal moats with castles and drawbridges here.
No, not at all.
So what exactly would give SRFM that kind of advantage?
It all comes down to their strategic positioning. Think about their market share. How strong is their brand? Do they offer any unique services or technologies that would be tough for competitors to copy? We're looking for something that sets them apart.
So basically those factors that could give them a leg up and help them stay ahead of the competition.
Exactly.
Now, I know Buffett also places a lot of importance on financial metrics like return on equity and profit margins.
Oh, absolutely. Those are crucial factors.
So how do those play into evaluating SRFM?
So return on equity, or ROE for short, tells us how effectively a company is using shareholder investments to generate profits. Buffett loves to see companies with a consistently high ROE.
Makes sense. The more bang for your buck, the better.
Right, and then you've got profit margins, which show us how much profit they're making for every dollar of revenue.
Got it. So the higher the profit margin, the more efficiently they're managing their costs and maximizing their earnings.
Exactly.
And of course, we can't forget about debt. I know that Buffett is always wary of companies with too much debt.
Oh yeah, excessive debt can be a red flag. So we'd want to look at their debt-to-equity ratio to get a handle on their overall financial risk.
Okay, so even if SRFM looks undervalued on the surface, we really need to dig into these other factors to get a true sense of their long-term potential.
Especially if we're looking at them through that Buffett lens.
Now, speaking of the future, SRFM has announced this ambitious plan to become profitable by 2025.
Yeah.
They even secured a $50 million loan to help them achieve that. What can you tell us about this plan?
Well, it's a multi-pronged approach. They're focusing on optimizing their operational efficiency, for one.
Streamlining things.
And they're also looking to expand their fleet.
Oh, and I read that they're bringing in those new Cessna Grand Caravan EX aircraft.
Oh yeah, those are nice.
Supposedly they're more reliable and require less maintenance, which could have a big impact on their bottom line.
Absolutely. Modernizing their fleet like that can lead to some major cost savings. Plus, it improves service reliability and ultimately makes for a better passenger experience, all of which could lead to increased revenue down the line.
Sounds like a smart move. But here's what I find really fascinating. SRFM is making a big push into electric aviation. They've partnered with Textron Aviation to develop electric powertrains for their planes.
That's where things get really interesting. Electric aviation is still in its early stages, but it has the potential to completely revolutionize the industry.
Just imagine quieter, more environmentally friendly flights. And on top of that, it seems like governments are starting to throw their support behind regional air mobility initiatives.
Yeah, and that government support could be a game changer for companies like SRFM. It could come in the form of funding for R&D or tax incentives to encourage adoption, or even investments in infrastructure to support electric aviation.
So we've got a company trying to reinvent itself and capitalize on this potentially huge trend in aviation.
Yeah.
But what should investors keep in mind as they consider SRFM? Is it as simple as buy low, sell high?
I wish it were that simple. But it's not. We're talking about a high-risk, high-reward situation here. There's a lot of potential for growth, especially if they execute their plans well and ride that wave of electric aviation. But there are also a lot of risks. So it's crucial to really weigh those risks and rewards before making any decision.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So we've talked about SRFM's financials, their market position, and how they stack up against some of Warren Buffett's investment principles. But we haven't really delved into the electric aviation landscape itself. And that seems pretty important for understanding SRFM's long-term prospects, wouldn't you say?
Oh, for sure. That's key. We need to look at the bigger picture things like the competitive landscape, the regulatory environment, and the technological advancements driving this shift towards electric flight.
All right, so it sounds like we have a lot more to unpack here.
We do.
So stay tuned, everyone, because when we come back, we'll dive deeper into the world of electric aviation and see where SRFM fits into all of it.
So before the break, we were talking about how SRFM is really betting big on the future of electric aviation.
Right, and I think it's a pretty smart move, given all the buzz around it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it seems like the natural next step after the whole electric car boom, right?
Yeah. Right, so what's really driving this push towards electric planes?
Well, it's a combination of things. For starters, the environmental benefits are huge. Traditional aircraft are major polluters, big contributors to greenhouse gas emissions.
Yeah, for sure.
Electric planes offer a much cleaner, a much more sustainable way to fly.
And quieter, too.
Oh, absolutely. Way quieter, which is great news for anyone who lives near an airport. Noise pollution has been a big problem, especially in urban areas.
It's a quality of life issue, for sure.
Exactly. And let's not forget about the potential cost savings. Electric powertrains are just inherently simpler. They're less expensive to maintain than those big old combustion engines.
Makes sense.
And that could translate into some pretty significant savings for airlines like SRFM.
So it's a win-win-win. Good for the environment, good for the people living near airports, and potentially good for companies' bottom lines. It almost sounds too good to be true. Are there any challenges to making this electric aviation dream a reality?
Well, of course, every new technology faces hurdles. Battery technology is a big one. We need batteries that are powerful enough to get these planes off the ground and keep them in the air for a reasonable amount of time.
Right.
But they also have to be lightweight. You don't want to weigh the plane down too much.
Yeah.
And then there's the issue of charging infrastructure. We've seen charging stations popping up everywhere for electric cars.
Yeah, they're on every corner now.
But what about planes? We're going to need specialized charging infrastructure at airports to handle these electric aircraft. It's a whole new ballgame.
So it's a big puzzle with a lot of pieces to figure out. But where does SRFM fit into all of this? What's their strategy?
Well, they're trying to position themselves as a leader in this emerging market, and they're focusing specifically on regional air travel,
Okay.
which is actually a smart move. Shorter distances are a lot more feasible for these early electric planes because of the whole battery range issue.
I see.
And their partnership with Textron Aviation to develop those electric powertrains, that's a big step in the right direction.
Yeah, Textron's a major player in the aviation industry. So that partnership gives SRFM access to a lot of expertise and resources.
Exactly. They're not trying to go it alone. And, that focus on regional travel, it's strategic. It lets them target a specific market segment that might not be as attractive to those bigger airlines that are focused on those long-haul flights.
So it's like they're finding their niche.
Exactly.
So for investors who are considering SRFM, what are some of the key developments they should be watching as this whole electric aviation story plays out?
Well, first and foremost, keep an eye on SRFM's progress in developing and actually getting their electric aircraft certified.
Yeah, they need to prove they can actually make this happen.
Right. They've got to walk the walk, not just talk the talk. And also pay attention to how the whole regulatory landscape evolves. Favorable regulations could really speed things up for the electric aviation industry and give SRFM a big advantage.
Right. It could be a make or break situation for them.
Exactly. And of course, you can't forget about the competition. There are a lot of other companies out there, both startups and established players, who are all vying for a piece of this electric aviation pie.
So SRFM's not guaranteed to come out on top.
Not at all. They need to execute their strategy flawlessly and be ready to adapt in what is a very rapidly evolving and highly competitive industry.
It's a tough market to crack.
It is.
So what are some of the red flags that investors should be on the lookout for? When should they start to worry?
Well, keep an eye out for any big delays in their development timeline. That could mean they're running into some unexpected technical challenges. And any setbacks in the regulatory process or signs that the electric aviation market isn't growing as fast as everyone expects, that could also be a problem.
Okay. And what about their financials? We talked about their debt earlier.
Right. Always keep an eye on the financials. Any unexpected need to raise capital, that could be a warning sign.
Okay, so it sounds like SRFM is a company with a lot of potential, but also a lot of risks. It's important to remember that investing in any individual stock, especially in a field as new and as uncertain as electric aviation, it's risky.
Very risky. And that's why diversification is so important. You know the old saying, don't put all your eggs in one basket.
Right.
It applies here big time. Spread your investments around different assets, different sectors, different companies. It's the best way to manage your risk.
So we've talked about all the excitement surrounding electric aviation and SRFM's big plans to be a major player in this space. We've also highlighted the risks and the potential rewards that come with investing in a company like this.
Yeah.
Now let's bring it all together and talk about what it all means for our listeners, the investors out there.
All right, so we've learned a lot about Surf Air mobility.
Yeah, a lot to digest.
But at the end of the day, the big question for our listeners is, should they consider adding SRFM to their portfolio?
Yeah, that's the question everyone wants answered.
Is it a buy or a pass?
Well, as with most things in investing, there's no easy answer.
Right.
Especially with a company like SRFM, there are just so many moving pieces, a lot of unknowns.
Exactly.
Can we at least give our listeners some kind of framework for thinking about SRFM and whether it aligns with their own investment goals and their risk tolerance?
I think we can do that. First off, we need to acknowledge that SRFM is a high-risk, high-reward stock.
Okay.
Their stock price is volatile.
Yeah.
And their success really hinges on a lot of factors that are still very uncertain.
Like the development and certification of their electric aircraft.
Right, exactly. And then the pace of regulatory approvals, and then just the overall growth of the electric aviation market as a whole.
A lot of ifs.
Yeah, a lot of ifs. If all the stars align, SRFM could see some pretty impressive growth.
Yeah.
But if they hit any major roadblocks along the way, well, the stock could take a real hit.
So this is probably not a stock for someone who's risk-averse or looking for a quick return?
No, not at all. This is more for someone who has a longer-term outlook, someone who's willing to ride out those ups and downs.
Right. Someone who really believes in the long-term potential of electric aviation.
Yeah, someone who's maybe even a little bit of a gambler.
All right. Now, in terms of valuation, we've seen some mixed signals. We talked earlier about that one analysis that suggests SRFM could be undervalued by 47%.
Yeah, that's a big number.
But it's based on their projected intrinsic value.
Right, which takes into account their future earnings potential.
Yeah.
So it's a bit of a crystal ball situation. We don't know for sure.
And then on the flip side, you had the analyst sentiment.
Right. The analysts currently have a hold rating on the stock with an average price target that's actually significantly lower than where it's trading right now.
So there's a disconnect there.
Yeah, for sure. Investors need to figure out how they feel about that disconnect. How much faith do they have in SRFM's ability to really make this happen? Can they actually capitalize on this electric aviation opportunity?
And that's where doing your own due diligence really comes into play.
Absolutely.
Don't just take our word for it or anyone else's.
Well,
you need to look beyond the headlines. Dig into the company's financials, their management team, their competitive landscape. Really understand their overall strategy.
yeah, it's your money.
It's your investment.
So you need to take ownership of that decision.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, we spent a lot of time talking about SRFM as a long-term investment.
Uh-huh.
But it is worth pointing out that their stock's volatility could also create some interesting opportunities for short-term traders.
Yeah, for sure. Those big price swings can be tempting for traders who are looking to make a quick profit.
Right. But of course, it's a whole different ballgame with a whole different set of risks.
Absolutely.
We're not going to get into specific trading strategies here,
That's a whole other podcast.
but it's something to be aware of.
Yeah, if you're thinking about trading SRFM, do your homework. Make sure you understand the risks.
And have a solid plan.
Don't just jump in blindly.
Now, for our long-term investors out there, the key takeaway here is that SRFM is a company operating in an industry that has the potential to completely transform air travel. They have ambitious plans, but they also face some pretty significant hurdles.
No shortage of challenges.
So as always, do your research.
Due diligence is key.
And if you need help, talk to a financial advisor.
Get some professional guidance.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of Investing Talk Podcast
Yeah, it's been fun.
and that you now have a better understanding of Surf Air Mobility and the future of electric aviation.
It's a fascinating topic.
If you liked what you heard, please subscribe to our channel.
Yeah, and tell your friends.
Share it on social media.
Leave us a comment.
We always appreciate your feedback. And we'll see you next time for another deep dive into the world of investing.